Hey, what's going on, you guys? I am wanting to talk today about questions that I get asked quite frequently, specifically regarding hunting in Alaska and specifically regarding DIY hunting in Alaska. And so I want to go through a little bit of a series on what it takes to DIY in various states. And the first one I'm going to start out with is Alaska. So with Alaska, it is for a lot of guys like a total bucket list hunt, or a hunt that you wait your whole life for, or a hunt that's like the dream hunt. It is considered by a lot as the quintessential hunt. North American big game hunt is moose hunting. So we're going to start with moose hunting and what it takes to DIY moose hunting. I've been guiding up there, packing, guiding, hunting for over 10 years. I'm still kind of a young guy, so I've been doing it a little bit and understand the contemporary necessities and logistics that need to happen in today's terms on how to DIY effectively. So we're specifically talking about moose, and the biggest thing when you're talking about hunting in Alaska is logistics. And logistics broken down are, how do you get in and out of a hunting area safely and reliably? Be it plane, raft, or truck. So those are three ways you can hunt in Alaska. You can still hunt Alaska out of a truck, rental car, whatever. You can hunt Alaska out of a raft. And you can hunt Alaska out of a bush plane, or a combination bush plane and raft. So we're going to go over some transportation things like that in this video and talk about moose hunting and DIY moose hunting and how that works. So first off, you have to arrange travel. There are two main areas that you'll fly from the lower 48 to Alaska to hunt moose: Anchorage or Fairbanks. And all in between there's really no commercial airports. So you're either flying into Anchorage or you're flying into Fairbanks. And if you're flying into Anchorage and you want to hunt moose, you better be very, very careful and understand the laws and what is actually open to moose hunting for a non-resident without a draw. A lot of the areas around Anchorage are only draw only moose hunts. So the further north you go, up towards Talkeetna and a little bit further north, then it kind of starts to open up to over-the-counter moose hunting. And you'll want to really, really be careful about what you're doing, and if you decide to try to hunt off of a road or a quad, what is actually open, because it is not all open. Unit 13 primarily is a draw. Unit 16, wide open. So Unit 16 is a little bit further north, and you can hunt there off of a truck, out of a raft, and on a plane. Unit 16 is pretty much wide open. Not to really take that and specifically isolate Unit 16, but it's just an example of around Anchorage hunting. Now you can go east and start hunting in some of that stuff further east, and there are parts of Unit 13 that are open, and 14 that are open and not draw, but specifically off of the road, you're going to find it tough to find a place to hunt. So let's say, well, we're going to fly in Anchorage, and now you have to decide, okay, I'm going to hunt around some of the units in Anchorage. How am I going to get there? Okay, you book a flight, get to Anchorage, stay in a hotel. Okay, so now how am I going to go hunting? Well, first I need a hunting license, which is usually about $185. I need a moose tag for a non-resident, which is $850. So there's $1,000 right there. Now I need to figure out what I'm going to do. Have I ever rafted before? Why do I want to raft hunt? How can I do that effectively? What are the dangerous pros and cons? And what are the actual logistics of doing a float hunt? I will tell you that if you have never floated or rafted before, it's very, very difficult for you to go in there and assume that you can float hunt. I know it looks easy on YouTube and certain videos, the guys float hunting. It is not easy. It is one of the most work required hunts you can do. There's a ton of logistics inside float hunting that you need to understand, and also just from a safety standpoint, it is very, very difficult and requires a lot of effort to float hunt effectively over a span of 10 days in an area that you have never been there before. So I'm assuming that by going and doing this thing, you probably haven't been to some of these locations. So Float hunting, basically, if you have never float hunted, if you don't have any experience on a raft, that is completely out of the question for you. It is not something that you want to undertake. It's something you want to do and familiarize yourself with, maybe around your home state. So go on a raft trip. Go on a 3-day overnight raft trip. Go on day trips. Because what happens with rafting is this. You are very, very limited to your pickup locations. And this is when logistics comes into big time play. So when you get dropped off at a spot via truck or bush plane in a lake or a river where you can raft, the idea is that you raft from point A to point B and you hunt in between point A and point B. But you have to get to point B to get out of the bush. In a lot of cases, there is no other option. So you better have a safety protocol and understanding of the terrain, understanding of the limitations that you and your party has hunting, especially when you take down a 1,600-pound animal and you need to figure out how to get it to point B, because that's when people run into a lot of problems with moose hunting. It is double the size of the moose and 4 times the amount of work. I'm sorry, double the size of an elk and 4 times the amount of work as an elk is. I've packed out a lot of elk and I've packed out a lot of moose. They are nowhere near in the same ballpark. So, that being said, so you want to raft from point A to point B, hunt in between, kill a moose or 2, and get out reliably, safely, and effectively within a time frame. Because that's also we're dealing with time here, guys. The season isn't open forever, and the pilots and or pickup arrangements are not going to be open forever. You will have communication. You will have a Garmin inReach or a sat phone or some other form of communication where you can text or contact the outside world. This isn't like it was 10, 15 years ago where all we had was a sat phone to help us, and hopefully we'll get through to somebody on another landline somewhere. So I strongly suggest you, if you haven't had any raft experience, to not do a raft trip for your first time. Now, that's something that I would suggest you do with a guide if you don't have the time or scenario around where you live. Maybe you don't live in a spot where there's rivers to really go rafting. That is a really, really fun hunt to do with a guide. I understand there's a cost difference there. It's going to cost a lot more to go on a fully guided hunt, but if you're really into float hunting, maybe save up a couple more years and go on a 10-day or 14-day float hunt with a guide. So the truck hunting, let's talk truck hunting. So raft hunting, let's pretend that's out for now. If it's your first time DIY hunting Alaska, let's do a truck hunt. So a lot of people don't realize there are truck hunting or road hunting possibilities in Alaska. But again, you do need to have some logistics figured out. You can rent a car, drive your own vehicle. You need to know what areas are open for non-residents without a draw off a road system. There aren't that many of them, but there are a few that you can do that a lot of people automatically assume that maybe are out of the question or whatever. So if you head east out of Anchorage, there are some awesome spots that you can go out towards Palmer and everywhere else out there that you can go and hunt from a truck. You can go north of Fairbanks and hunt from a truck. Basically from Fairbanks to the Yukon River. When you start getting into the Brooks Range and north of the Yukon River where there's the Alaska pipeline, you deal with a corridor and a draw. So not only do you have an archery corridor within 5 miles of the pipeline on each side of the Dalton Highway and or called the Hall Road, but you also have a draw when it comes to moose season. That is not the case with caribou, and we will talk about that on a later video. But with moose specifically, there are some spots in between north of Fairbanks and around Fairbanks that you can hunt from a truck. I would not suggest this. I would not try to hunt moose from a truck, because really what that means is you're parking a truck and going hiking. You can't realistically road hunt, because just like anywhere hunting in any other part of the world, there is going to be every every other hunter that can hunt from a trucker quad hunting from a trucker quad, and those people are residents and they know the moose and they're not going to want you there, and it's not going to be a good situation for you if you try to road hunt and try to compete with resident hunters that live there, that a lot of times require a moose to feed them through the winter. So understandably, you will not be met with a lot of invitations to go hunting with anybody from a road. So if you have a cousin, sister, brother, any next of kin, it doesn't have to be next of kin with moose, but anybody that lives there that you're going to try to go and hunt with them, that would be the scenario that I would suggest truck hunting with. Say you've got a cousin or a buddy that lives in Anchorage who's a big hunter and he knows the spots, he takes his truck, he's got an Alaskan license plate, cool, go with him. That's a great way to kind of start out. Or if they live in Fairbanks or they're in the military and they're either stationed outside of Anchorage or outside of Fairbanks and they want to go hunting and they want to go mess around, cool. That's what I would suggest as a truck hunt. So we have raft float hunting covered. You need to do it if you have experience and you need to understand rivers. Truck hunting, I only suggest you do it if you have friends, family, anybody in the area that live in Alaska that can help you and take you along for the ride. The third way of travel, which is the most preferred throughout all of Alaska, is by plane. So moose hunting by plane is predominantly done through air taxis in the DIY area of hunting. So an air taxi is exactly like it sounds. It is somebody that you call and you say, hey, I want to get flown out to this spot. Done. An air taxi literally says, yep, here's our weight requirements, here's our firearm requirements, here's our bear spray requirements, here's our all the limitations, meet us here, here's how much it costs, here's where we're going to pick you up, here's where we're going to drop you off, and you don't have any wiggle room. You may have weather come in, you need to be ready to be able to stay for 5 extra days at that spot. You need to be all these things. So that's an air taxi service. An air taxi service is really, really good, but a lot of them are getting booked out further and further and further in the future, especially with moose hunting and caribou hunting. So in anything, you want to have a little previous knowledge of an area or suggested area or understanding of where you need to go. So one thing to be very clear about an air taxi is they're not a hunting guide and they're not a registered outfitter. They cannot suggest spots to hunt for you. They cannot show you where they cannot provide locations of drop points basically for you. In certain areas, you go, hey, I want to get dropped off in a lake, and they go, yeah, we'll probably drop you off on this side of the lake because it's easier for us. They can do that. What they can't do is say, hey, I want to hunt Unit 16. Hey, I want to hunt the Alaskan Range. Hey, I want to kind of hunt over by this drainage. And then what an air taxi can't do is go, yeah, here, I got a couple spots that I can drop you off that are really, really good. And we're going to go looking for moose for you. And they can't do that. It's illegal. So you have to provide all the information down to the landing strip of where you want to be dropped off. And then they will decide, hey, this is where we can pick you up. This is the time frame picking you up. This is how much it costs for extra flights to get out your moose. So that's another thing that you have to understand. These flights are very, very expensive. I would plan for $1,000 an hour of flying, just kind of like a rough estimate. Basically, it's going to cost you about $1,000 of flying. And that really depends on what kind of plane you're taking out here. If you're going to fly out in a Beaver, it's going to be more than $1,000 an hour. If you are flying out in a 185 on floats, it'll probably be around $1,000 an hour. If you're flying out in a Super Club, it might be a little bit less, but you're going to have more flights associated with that hunt if you get a moose down and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of times an air taxi will not include moose transportation in their costs because of a simple reason. They're not trying to be deceitful or trying to do any of that. It's if you don't get a moose, you don't need to pay for it. But if you do get a moose, you're going to pay for it. So say you get dropped off in a lake and you shoot a moose. A typical moose trip is, it's going to be 2 or 3 trips in a plane depending on the size and the weight requirements of that plane. 2 or 3 trips to get that moose out. And at $1,000 an hour, you can start doing the math. So say you want to go with a buddy. you and a buddy, you guys can all fit in one flight, let's say. So let's say by the way, it's not just you getting out there. It's $1,000 for the plane to get back to home base. So it's not just a one-way $1,000. So say it's an hour and a half to get you out to your hunt location from somewhere around Anchorage. It's an hour and a half in a bush flight, which makes it a 3-hour trip. So that's $3,000. You just got a moose down. Okay, so let's get that moose out. They're going to come out and get your moose. Let's say 3 flights to be safe. And at 3 flights at an hour and a half, we're talking, you see how this is adding up pretty quickly? So when you're talking about 3 round trips at 3 hours a piece and $1,000 an hour, you're talking about $9,000. Okay, so your hunt just went from $1,000 moose tag and license, and you're sharing this with a buddy, of course, with the other flight. So you just paid $1,500 to get flown out, not to mention food and travel and all that stuff. So that's another $1,000. Now you just shot a moose. That's a $9,000 moose pack out, flight out. Sometimes it can be cheaper, just depends. I mean, some guys you can potentially fly commercial out of Anchorage, get closer, and so maybe the flights out to where they're flying you is only, half an hour. So maybe that 3 trip is only 3 hours total, but you see how it can add up, and you have to know the differences, because you're going to pay for it one way or the other. You're going to pay commercial to get some fly out in the bush and then have a bush plane fly you out from there, or you can stay in Anchorage and pay extra to fly from Anchorage and get a moose out. So regardless of how you do it and the different avenues, bush planes are expensive, flying out to the bush is expensive, and understanding that when you shoot a moose, it is very expensive, and you also have a time frame. So that goes in the next kind of phase of what I want to talk about, is going with a buddy. So when you go hunting with a buddy, you got to understand that you need to be very, very tactful and understand that if you shoot 2 moose, it can be very, very expensive, number one, and it can also be extremely unrealistic to shoot 2 moose. So what I suggest to guys is, if you shoot a moose in the right spot early, say day 3 on a 10-day hunt, and you get that moose ready to an airstrip and get it out, it is very, very reasonable that you can shoot another moose responsibly and get it out in a respectable time and not have a bunch of issues. It comes into an issue when you kill a moose 2 miles from an airstrip. It takes you 7 days to get the moose back, and now you have 3 days to hunt, and you are just so bushed, so tired from you and your buddy packing out a moose that you're like, just pick us up. And it's understanding the different levels and different scenarios going into a DIY moose hunt that you have to understand. The logistics part about it is huge. Getting the meat out in a timely fashion when it's taking care of the meat is extremely legally binding on you as a hunter like no other place on earth. So you need to understand that when you do get a moose out, it has to be taken out specifically. In every unit, you have to look at, how is the meat required to come out? Is it required to come out on the bone? Can I bone it out? How much meat is expected to come out? Guys, they have weight requirements. If you shoot a moose, an Alaska wildlife trooper can come in and he can actually weigh the amount of meat that you took out of the field and say, that is not the appropriate amount of meat for a mature bull moose that you just took out of the field. He can weigh it. He doesn't even have to see the carcass and see the meat that you left. He can weigh it. And they outline this in the game and fish regulations, guys. So there's a lot of things you have to be aware of. Not only legality of what bull is legal, if it's a 3-tine area, if it's an any bull area, if it's a 4-tine or 50-inch area. We're not even getting into the hunting part about it. We're just talking about logistics. But you have to understand, this is a 3-dimensional hunting process that happens that a lot of people don't understand why the big price tag is associated with these fully guided hunts, because there's so much involved with moose hunting and taking a moose and getting hunters and getting moose in and out safely. I can't emphasize enough, guys, you have to be safe. No animal is worth dying for, and no animal is worth going to jail for. So there's a lot of things we have to be careful of. So getting a moose out in a timely fashion, getting it out legally, the legal requirements for both the antlers and the meat, and getting out in a safe and timely fashion out of the field in general. So you're not stuck out in the bush for 25 days, which can happen and does happen sometimes with weather and air taxis. That has never happened on a guided hunt that I've ever been associated with. We have our pilots in-house and we send them at the first available time. But when you go with an air taxi, you're probably on a list of 20 to 60 other hunters that are within that same kind of time frame. So you're kind of on a list. You're on a waiting list. And if you're not ready, if you don't meet the time frame, if you're in a different spot, you may not get out. And that's the bottom line. That's also the pros and cons of going the air taxi. It can be less expensive in some ways, but it can be higher risk. And the logistics are way more involved when it's up to you, because you have to provide all the gear, all the food, and all the locations that an air taxi cannot and will not help you with, versus going guided, or like, for example, what I do with my drop camp hunters and other outfitters do with their drop camp hunters, or DIY guys, is we provide the services and logistics and none of the guiding. So you fly in and you meet us, we fly you out with our pilots, our gear, our food, and a good place to hunt. We're not just dropping you off on a string of drop-offs that, hey, we need to drop off 40 people, so here's a lake, here's a lake, here's a lake, here's a lake. That can happen too. So it's understanding the DIY process, understanding the costs associated with it. I would say obviously the least expensive, most cost-effective way to hunt is with a buddy in a truck in Alaska. I would say that's the least amount of success rate for moose hunting. The next step is potentially raft hunting from a road system. So you can drive some roads, get dropped off from a road, a raft and float, and get picked up on another road. That's not very expensive. However, that is it's extremely labor intensive, like we talked about, and you have to have experience to do that, or you're putting your life in danger and anybody with you. So that's something that you need to research and have some prior experience with before you embark on something like that. Or go on a guided hunt and see how it's done and then do it yourself. And then the third is most expensive and also most effective for moose hunting, which is get flown out by an air taxi or a transporter or a registered guide and do a DIY hunt yourself with various levels of provision for you. From the bare minimum air taxi, we bring all our gear, you just fly us in and out, we know where we want to go, etc., to having somebody that will get you all dialed in, have all the gear, have all the food, have the planes and pilots on standby for you, like we do specifically for our drop camp hunters, but no guide. And then obviously, we haven't talked about it, but doing a fully guided hunt, that is the most expensive way to hunt. It also is the highest success rates generally, from our experience, just because you have the ability to have a guide and have packers and have your hunt be as successful as possible. For somebody who's never hunted moose before, it can be very, very difficult to come in and just be successful in a moose hunt when they don't really know the moose behavior. But all that being said, guys, you can totally DIY hunt yourself and be successful in 3 different forms. Just understand the differences and the various hurdles that you have to jump to be successful in each of those areas. So I hope that helped, guys. I want to give as much information as I can to you about hunting in Alaska, and more specifically DIY hunting, and hopefully get you out there hunting and then be successful. I want to hear some stories. So, and then maybe down the road you want to get involved and become a guide or do a guided hunt and understand that. That's great. So I just want to get guys out there. I want to help you do DIY adventures the most effectively and understand how it works and some of the areas. In some of these spots, guys, in Alaska, if you need help with scouting packages in Alaska, we can help that too. So it kind of aids to your DIY scouting adventure. There are scouting packages that we offer that are on the side, but I would just suggest you do as much research as you can and understand that it's going to cost you one way or the other, just how much time and energy you want to spend. So, all right, good luck out there, guys. If you have any questions, hit me up in the comments or contact me on the links below in the description, and I'd love to help you guys out. Talk soon.